I mix what I like. All right, world, what's up again? Back with you. I Mix What I Like live. Again, I'm Jared Ball, your host at I Mix What I Like for all your relevant social media. And please be sure to sign up, subscribe at imixwhatilike.org so that you don't miss any of the work that I and my colleagues do across multimedia. And please also consider sharing, subscribing, and even becoming a member to this channel. There are some developments that hopefully I'll be able to announce soon. A new project we're going to try to put together. So your support would be greatly appreciated. And again, it's not going to me. It is going to collective work that is meant to be of some greater help and significance. As usual, please consider signing up and following also the JerichoMovement.com website there for support of our political prisoners. Sign up for the Freedom Archives PP or prisoner newsletter so you can get updates sent to your email box. Prison Radio to get latest commentaries from Mumia Abu-Jamal and others. And shortly, I think we're planning to schedule soon some visits from the Jailhouse Lawyers Collective and the Abolitionist Law Center. So other folks doing work on behalf and with political prisoners. And of course, we'll try to continue to get more as well. And while we are waiting for our next guest, Margaret Kimberly, who is going to join us, senior columnist with blackagendareport.com, and of course, author of the latest book, Prejudential, Black America and the Presidents. She was just here. I think she had a little difficulty, and we expect that she'll be jumping right back. And you can see my daughter Marley interview Margaret about that book at imixwhatilike.org as well. And I'll probably put that link in this here if I didn't already put it in the YouTube link as well. And one other bit of business that I wanted to quickly share. And do I have it in my notes? No, that's it. So maybe it'll come back to me. But one thing that I wanted to just quickly carry over from the last conversation we had with Dr. Arujo about the transnational issue of reparations, comparison to reparations, is similar to something that I was saying after our interview earlier today with Aaron Mate, which I would encourage you to go check at imixwhatilike.org as well. Because I saw some of the comments in the chats that were, somewhat critical of these guests for what they do or don't know about Black America or even the African world in general. And I'm not going to debate that, but what I think I just want to be clear about that while my interests primarily are the African diaspora and Black America in particular, and just the diaspora in general. I do think it's important that we hear from other folks who are doing work that we can learn from and build from. So I'm not inviting everybody here with the expectation that they're going to inform our ideological perspectives or our worldview or our course established politics, or even to develop our analysis or interpretation of the world. It's merely to give us information that I think we can make use of. So I'm not looking for every guest to be, a Black radical militant, and I'm not looking for all of them even to necessarily agree with those politics. I'm looking for them to help inform those of us who might agree with those politics and want to build around those politics, be able to do so maybe a little more effectively. So it's not, anyway, so I just wanted to make that quick point. And I'm not inviting, unless we predetermine to do so, I'm not inviting people here to just debate or to bash them where we disagree. That's not what I'm interested in doing. So I just wanted to make that clear. I hope that does clarify something. But again, I do appreciate, and we do expect Margaret Kimberly to bring that fire, and I'm not sure what just has happened. So I'm going to check back with her in a second. She is amazing, and I'm looking forward to the conversation too, especially after yesterday, and especially after we were just setting up to talk about before we went live. Yeah, I hope everything is good with what she's would love to co-host. Would love to see co-host Danny Haifong. Yeah, I hear you. Because at the risk of contradicting myself, I mean, I think, honestly, I think Danny does good work. I just think that need to think about how I would want to address that. I think that he gets enough run elsewhere, and I think also that frankly, I don't really know, but frankly, he and I had a little off the record little hiccup. So I don't know if that's going to actually happen. So we'll have to try to make do with Margaret, and I'm not without my hiccups with people out here in the world. So, and I'm not without my contradictions either. So, but I have had Danny on the program back when we were doing radio, and he's at mixwhatilike.org and the archives there. But I think we might, for the time being, at least have to make do as best we can without, shout out to Black Alliance for Peace. No doubt Margaret is a part of that. In fact, let me just check up and make sure that she's okay, because I think she was having a connection issue, and we were literally just in there. I think there she is. Welcome, Margaret Kimberly. It's good to see you. I've already done all the introductions and the setup. Try to hold it down while you were making your way back. So
I was here. I don't know what happened, but anyway.
I don't know either, and but we'll just go as let's start running while you're here.
Yeah.
I know initially I was going to start with the big broad question. I titled this segment Toward a Black Agenda, obviously playing on you being a senior columnist at Black Agenda Report, and the broader mission of that outlet being as I understand it, have understood it over the years, trying to inform Black America into developing a radical agenda so that we can stop drifting in the wind and being played by everybody and their mama. But after yesterday, I guess what I would want to do is amend my question to say, in light of what we saw yesterday in downtown DC at the Capitol, now what should be our Black agenda?
Well, I think our agenda shouldn't change.
Right on.
Our first agenda item is self-determination. And it's easy to say that word. It's more difficult to achieve. But we have got to find our way towards, first of all, going back to what we used to know how to do in decades past, and that is to make demands on the system. The things that we need to see, the things that we want, independently of the electoral system. The electoral system is a big problem for us. We've made our biggest strides historically when we have been less dependent on political parties. It was, first it was the Republicans after the Civil War till the well into the 1900s, that they were the Black People's Party. The Democrats were the party of the segregated South. Then we see this switch in the 60s. And now, but everyone seems to forget. Everyone wants to talk about the 60s, about the civil rights movement, and it's been fetishized. But instead of talking about the fact that we were independent actors. We made demands. We didn't care if politicians didn't like our demands. We didn't care if people didn't like what we said. And that is, whatever successes we had came about because of that. But unfortunately, the destruction of the movement, which was quite deliberate and conscious, and the rise of this Black political class, which seemed like a good thing for Black people to be in these places and spaces, but they're part of the system and don't act in our interest. So now we have this situation where Black people, we seem to Our politics now amounts to just keeping Republicans out of office. That's it. And if the Democrats are in, we can breathe a sigh of relief. The Republicans are in, oh my God, it's so terrible. And of course, that's even true more now with Trump about to make his exit, but being Trump, going out in a blaze of glory and dropping bombs on his way out the door. But it's self-determination. It's what do we want to see happen? How do we become independent again? How and we do that by not by being centrist. That's the worst thing. We've always been the most radical, and that is when we and frankly the rest of the country have profited the most. There would be no Medicaid, there would be no Medicare if it weren't for the Black Liberation Movement. Millions of people profited from what we did. So that's something for us to keep in mind instead of now becoming convinced, being propagandized because of people being co-opted and deliberately leading us astray. We have now been led to believe that we should do the opposite of what actually works best for us and works best for the country.
Yeah, no, first of all, I appreciate that you remind us that our agenda shouldn't change regardless of one particular event or uproarious activity or by a group of whatever euphemism people might want to throw in at that point. But one of the things that I noticed that again, I felt the same. Well, I don't know. I remember feeling this sense that I'm about to describe most vividly first after the Freddie Gray uprising. Mm-hmm. Maybe because I was in Baltimore and doing some journalism at the time. I don't know, but and I'm in a different space now. But I feel the same sense after what happened last night. That is, so much of the mainstream conversation and even some in the so-called left alternative space has seemed to take on this sense of trying to reaffirm the already should have been illegitimate leadership from before. It looks to come back and tell us now how to interpret this situation, whether it's a pundit on mainstream media, or whether it's a religious leader or a civil rights leader or a journalist or an activist or a sports TV commentator. I mean, ESPN did this whole self-righteous, indignant thing today about, how what has happened to this country and, what Trump has done to this country. And almost with this sense, sometimes overtly said, but I think more, covertly said that if we could just get back to Biden,
yeah,
and get back on track here, we'll be good. And I'm saying you are all the more the problem than he was anyway.
Well, one of the things that I think everybody should keep in mind, all this hand wringing about the Trumper riot at the Capitol yesterday by people who have upended democracy all over the world. These actions are always bipartisan, by the way. So the National Endowment for Democracy, which is the CIA, is what it is. It's NGO, but it's the CIA. They give people money in Hong Kong to try to weaken the People's Republic of China, and people ran amok. They attacked their legislative building, and those people were praised. They came to Washington. Nancy Pelosi, Donald Trump, everybody said they were phony progressives like AOC, talked about the Hong Kong freedom fighters. This was an effort by the United States to destabilize another country. This is what happens with Haiti, with Venezuela. I could go on and on, listing all the countries where the U.S. has sent mobs, sent its forces in to upend other people's democratic functions. So that's one thing everybody needs to keep in mind. The U.S. does this to the rest of the world all the time. So if you think this is so horrible, then you need to step up and oppose U.S. foreign policy. The other thing is the whole world has been Trump-centric, even in hatred of Trump, even in opposition to Trump. So everything's measured by him. So all we need is for him to be gone and everything will be fine. But this is the kind of thing Joe Biden did in Ukraine. They sent mobs to overthrow an elected president, to pry Ukraine out of Russia's orbit and people were killed. And there's an ongoing civil war in that country. It's now a failed state thanks to the Obama-Biden administration. So I would hope that people remember that. And also, you know, these people who rioted yesterday, they've been doing this all over the country for a number of years now, going into state houses with their guns. A lot of these states allow it; it's not illegal. Threatening people, and nobody ever does anything. Democrats act afraid of them too. So they have been emboldened not just by Trump. So let's take him out of it's hard to do because he did instigate this whole event, but let's take him out of the picture, as hard as that can be or seem to be, and think about this in a, you know, in a more in a way that's some good analysis and some left-wing analysis, and not see, and one of the worst outcomes of this is to sanctify that god-awful Joe Biden. He is horrible. He is a nightmare. He was always one of the most right-wing Democrats. That's why Obama chose him as his vice president. Nobody should forget, and if people have not watched it, take the time to watch this meeting that he had with people who've been called civil rights leaders, and he insulted them. He told them, if you don't like what well, the hell with all of you. Basically, he said, I'm paraphrasing, but something like that. People came to him, except for Al Sharpton, who being a snake, saying, I'll never embarrass you. So he was clearly letting him know, it's like, you know, Al's doing what Al usually does. But for example, there was a proposal, and I wish I could remember all the participants' names. I'm not trying to be disrespectful. I'm just blanking on their names. Someone in the meeting said the Justice Department should keep track of police killings. That's a very mild request. He explodes. Well, it's, you know, you're talking about defunding the police. Nobody said anything about defunding the police. This is the guy we're getting. We're getting someone who doesn't respect Black people, who talked about a racial jungle and the corn pop story, and who was the point person against busing from the time he entered the Senate. He's going to be a nightmare for us. And Kamala Harris, my God, when she isn't claiming to have listened to rappers who weren't recording yet, and then she was celebrating Kwanzaa, and then she fell out of the stroller and told her mother she wanted freedom, and the Russians instigated our support of Colin Kaepernick. She's horrible. They're both horrible.
Anytime your own father has to come out and say, stop misrepresenting your Blackness and your family. I mean, you know, anyway, first of all, while you were here, I wanted to remember before we go too far to publicly thank you for being the only person to review my book, and because I know you can appreciate having published on your own, the importance of people talking about it, and I did want to just thank you, but before I've moved on and forgot, I wanted to thank you for doing that. And because, well, thank you, but also because, but also that, you know, the one you've just published, Prejudential, Black America and the Presidents, right? Did I get the subtitle right? Black.
Yep, you did.
Yeah. And I told everybody before you got here that they could go see my daughter interview you about it, which was a thrilling for all of us. But I'm wondering, you know, but it also occurred to me again that your book says a lot about how we could be better, or what it prepares us for maybe better understanding what's about to happen with Biden. If you want, I have other things I want to ask you about yesterday and all that, but since I've gone to this segue, could you talk a little bit about Prejudential and maybe give us a summary of the theme or themes that would prepare us for what we're about to see with Biden?
Sure. My book Prejudential was published last almost a year ago. I can't believe it. Last February, and it is it's 45 essays about just written a 46th essay
Oh.
on president about one for each president, and I talk about the every president's relationship with and treatment of Black people. And one of the things that became clear to me as I started the project was that anti-Blackness is foundational to the country. We have a settler colonial state. 10 of the first 12 presidents were slaveholders. We have presidents like, well, one of the things I realized, I'm sorry, I'm rambling a bit here. As I was doing my research, I realized how much lying goes on in academia, among scholars, among documentary makers about these presidents. And there's no secret archive of information. It's very clear, for example, that Abraham Lincoln's primary goal was to get Black people out of the country. He never gave up his dream of having a white America and sending Black people away. There was actually a colony briefly in Haiti. So those people who say, well, he started out, with the colonization plan, but then he gave it up. He never did. He talked about it as late as a couple of weeks before he was assassinated. This notion of having a Black People's Party, first it's the Republicans in the Reconstruction era, after the will to protect Black people diminished more and more and more. It became less and less useful to hold up these Republicans. You even have people like Teddy Roosevelt, who waited till after Election Day to sentence Black soldiers to discharge them from the army after they fought back when they were attacked in Texas. And then, of course, occasionally there's a good Democrat like FDR, but he depended on support from the segregationists. He was very racist himself, he and his wife. So and
that New Deal wasn't, for Black people, wasn't,
no,
all encompassing and wonderful either,
No, it was not, because of his reliance on the segregationists in the South. He always hesitated. That was always his excuse. I would love to help. Walter White or whomever. But I can't because I need, cracker Senator so-and-so to help me out with this or that. And so that was always the story. And that's the story of the Kennedys. It was a story with LBJ. But we were the ones who pressed the case. We were the ones who pressed the case when enslaved people ran to Union lines. It became a war about slavery, whether Lincoln wanted to say it was or not. That became the issue. When A. Philip Randolph threatened to march on Washington, then you got some tepid civil rights legislation. All of these people had to be pushed. So if there's one theme from the book, is that we have to save ourselves. There's no savior. There's no savior politician, no savior political party. It's a litany of people who have been lionized when they should not be. And it doesn't, and by the way, if you look at, say in recent years, once the Democrats became the Black People's Party, you had Jimmy Carter running for office talking about alien influences in neighborhoods, and he wouldn't force anybody to go for busing, and Bill Clinton executing a man on in Arkansas,
a mentally disabled man,
a mentally disabled man who could not defend himself. So on and on and on. He's the one who deregulated Wall Street. He's the one whose welfare reform for 60 years after FDR, you had a legal right to seek public assistance. And Clinton got rid of that and sent poor people further into poverty. And then, of course, we have Barack Obama, Saint Barack Obama. My God, what a horror. Every president appealed to racism to get.
And you didn't even have the Flint water drinking incident in your book about Obama, right?
That's true. I could have. There's so many things. It's like,
I know you could have had a lot, but that just symbolically and because it was right there live on camera twice,
And that's
it just
true.
burned in my head.
He pulled the stunt twice in Flint instead of helping Michigan. The Republicans took over the state because Democrats didn't care. Republicans took over the state, undid the will of the people, and so Flint was getting fresh water from whichever Great Lake is near Flint. Sorry, I'm not sure which one. To the Flint River, which was polluted by General Motors for years, and this was in 2016. I believe it's one of the reasons Hillary Clinton lost Michigan. She lost by only 10,000 votes. If they'd done something for
Margaret, we know that was the Russians. We know it was the Russians, and Putin suppressed the vote in Michigan. Come on now.
So, don't make me laugh. I know you talked to Aaron Mate too.
Yeah, so I'm all loaded up now. Like I'm all ready now.
But that, I'm glad you mentioned that. It has been disappeared, the fact that the Democrats screwed up and let Trump win. We're not allowed to talk about it. That's one of the reasons they ginned up Russiagate. It lets them off the hook. But I'm sorry, there's so many things I could talk about.
No, that's look. I dug through the comments and we found criticism of your book. And Black Neto here, or Nito, forgive me, says that you didn't have enough Reagan in your book, and that's the same thing. With all of these people, you could have written volumes of their racism and you'd still be writing.
They could each have their own book. If you want to talk about racism, each president could have his own book. So that's true. But Reagan, I think Reagan the worst president ever, I'd say, was Andrew Jackson, with his genocide of the indigenous population in the Southeast, which led to the increase in the plantation economy, the increase in enslavement. He was the worst. In modern history, I would say there's so many who are bad, though, but Reagan is the one who turned back the clock, who undid even Nixon. There were, I don't want to praise him, but these were our victories. So there was still a federal jobs program. My first job was a CETA job, CETA, federal jobs program in the 70s. Reagan got rid of all of that. Reagan started the drive towards austerity, which is creating so much suffering now. The federal government used to pay for public housing, and we had, why are people homeless? Because they can't afford housing, and that's something the federal government used to do. So they demonized every federal program, and now we have this and moved further to the right. So the Democrats go right with them, and so now very few people question. For example, Bernie Sanders said public college should be free or cheap. Well, we had that. Had that until Reagan. We had free. The City University of New York, here where I live, was tuition free. Public colleges all over the country were so cheap they were practically free. And it's treated now as some crazy radical idea. And I'm like, excuse me, there's still people alive who had free college.
Right.
But all that started with Reagan.
Yeah,
you can make that argument. He was.
I always remind, his death occurred during my wedding. So we and I raised a glass during the celebration.
Did you really?
Oh, absolutely. When word spread that happened, because for my generation, and people give me grief to this day for it. There were a couple people that felt uncomfortable about that, at the wedding and all that. And people to this day, when I bring this point up, they feel uncomfortable, because we're conditioned not to feel bad about the passing or the death of anyone. But for my generation in particular, he was the boogeyman. He, maybe more than any other singular figure. In whether it was rap lyrics or just news. He was the boogeyman. So, anyway, I don't have any.
You shouldn't apologize. It must have been a great moment. I hope there's video of that.
There isn't, unfortunately. This was just before the cell. I'm old enough now. This is just before the cell phone craze and all of that. Right. We didn't have video, and there was a moment where human beings didn't seek to record every single thing we do. But unfortunately, I would have liked to have that on tape. It was just such a spontaneous. I had to just.
I remember when he died. there was so much propaganda about how popular he was.
That's right.
He did win two elections overwhelmingly. That's true.
Sure.
But they went on and on and on about how people loved him. People loved him. He was popular. Everybody loved him. I was like, no, everybody did not love him.
That's Ronnie Reagan, man. I listened to Gil Scott.
But it was horrible. But propaganda is a huge problem in history, the way history is taught with our corporate media. We are lied to so often. And the most basic things that we're taught about presidents, for example, are, and I think people who write about them are people who respect them and admire them and whatever. So I sort of get that, why that happens, but we don't all have to be that. We don't all have to follow along with that. And the racist legislation and the racist public policy and the racist remarks have to be told, because so then you don't, if we do that, then you don't have people dancing in the street when Biden wins. I could not believe that. It was so, it was,
well, look, it's almost that same feeling now. I was going to ask you about this anyway, but it seems that same feeling now after Ossoff and Warnock win in Georgia. I mean, it seems like there's this euphoria occurring around that.
They're going to save us. Trump is the one who made America was okay until Trump won. All we need is for him to be gone. Now, I'm glad they won in Georgia, because let's see what they do. All this talk of, well, if we controlled both houses of Congress, well, you know, we lost the presidency. Well, we only have the House. Well, okay, now you got it all. You got the presidency, you got the House, you got the Senate. Let's see what you do.
Well, but the only problem, sorry to cut you off, but the only problem with that is that people were saying that now that with this victory, Biden will be able to get his agenda through. But I keep saying, but what he said about his agenda is increase police funding and keep the wars, you know, no health care. So I'm like, great.
But this is our moment. And, you know, going back to what I said about how we have to save ourselves, people must hit the Democrats with every demand, everything they want, including the kitchen sink, because we are going to be told, even though now they say, well, if they just win these races, then we can do what we want. Then it'll be, well, you know, the Senate's really divided. We can't do anything. And Biden is one of these people who always talked about how he had to reach across the aisle. He even said once, it's not good for one party to have too much control. So this is the time to make every demand. It is time to call these phony progressives to account, call the Congressional Black Caucus to account. What good does it do if people call themselves progressive and they're DSA and they're this and they're that, and nothing changes? So we cannot uplift any of these people. And when, you know, January 20th comes, stop talking about Trump. Stop it. Stop. And I don't care what he does. And I'm sure these, you know, his cohort of, you know, rioting, deplorable, crazy people. Well, you know, he's not going to leave Twitter. He's going to try to be a force. So what? He's not president anymore. And it doesn't matter what he says or what Rush Limbaugh says or some. You never notice when a Democrat's in office, they're always telling you about what some right winger had to say, who's not in office, who has no control. That's just to keep you off balance and keep you from making the demands that you should be making. So I fully expect that to happen again, but I don't want to hear it. I don't want to hear any excuses. And I also don't want to hear anymore from these people who just said anybody on the left should shut up. And it's, if you criticize, it's your fault. That Hillary Clinton, who had $1 billion and still couldn't be a reality show host, partly because of what we just talked about in Flint, the things that they just didn't do for people.
I mean, I heard even, I think it was Jimmy Dore actually, but I think somebody was saying, I think it was he who was saying that if these folks who were down at the Capitol yesterday had been getting were on their fifth $2,000 a month check, they wouldn't have been down there.
No.
If Pelosi had even signed off on it, and even if it had to be given ultimately credit to Trump, You know, she could have claimed credit for calming everybody down or preventing.
They had a bigger deal before Election Day, but they didn't want to help Trump. They didn't want him to get credit. So, you know, and Trump with his crazy self, I don't mean to say that his intentions were noble in any way, but when he started talking about $2,000 instead of 600 the day before, what did she say? Well, it's not what we want, but it's substantial.
That's substantial.
Right. And then Trump says $2,000. Now she's embarrassed and she's like, "Oh yeah, $2,000." I'm like, "But you didn't say that before."
You didn't, sure didn't. You said not to do it.
Said it before. So I think, and I don't want to excuse the people that we're talking about, but they need this stuff too. Whatever they say about big government or whatever, if there was Medicare for all, they'd use it. You think they wouldn't use it? Of course they would. If there was the stimulus we should have, where unemployed people were made whole and businesses were made whole, they would take it. But it's easy for them to hang on to these right-wing tropes because nobody does anything for them either. So the duopoly is a bit like, you know, it's pretend, like professional wrestling, you know, pretend villains, pretend heroes. And in the end, all we get is this, we get the same thing, 700 some odd billion in defense spending, no health care for the people, no minimum wage is still, federal minimum wage is still $7 and change an hour.
It's crazy.
And you know, so let's see, that's one demand. That's something very simple. Now, every time they talk about raising the minimum wage, it's like, well, it'll be $15 an hour, but in like 6 or 7 years, it's not enough now. So that's no reason to sit back and claim some victory that Biden gives lip service to some half measure. So it's up to us. We always have to stay in a struggle. There's no moment when you win and you can sit back and, sadly, can sit back and relax because there's so many forces arrayed against us.
You know, I made a note here. I want to go back and ask you real quick couple things. I saw earlier on one of these mainstream channels, they showed the video of when, or a picture of one of these Capitol building invaders putting a rebel flag and a MAGA hat on Gerald Ford's statue. And one of the liberal commentators was just indignant. He was just so upset. And I actually thought then about the conversation we were going to have today. And I thought, unfortunately, there's some reasons in the house that I can't get to my books right now, but I couldn't pull your book out. But I was thinking, if I remember correctly, Gerald Ford is not some progressive revolutionary hero who might have been so uncomfortable with a MAGA hat on. You know, in other words, trying to create this phony juxtaposition between a previous Democratic president and Trump. So I said, let me ask. I'm going to make sure to ask Margaret about that when she gets here. What would Gerald Ford have actually felt about a MAGA hat?
Who knows? You know, he started out as one of these moderate Republicans, so-called, but then as they became the whiter people's party, he was always against busing. At one point, he said it was okay for, he had to walk back the remark, though, that it was okay for private schools to discriminate. So he was, you know, Nixon, why do you think Nixon picked him? Come on. And of course, then he right away pardoned Nixon. So, but he was in office such a short time. It was like 2 years, 74 to 76. But he was no better. And when it came to Black people, you know, the more anti-Black politicians are, the more it benefits them. And the issue could be busing at that time. It could then be crime. It could be anything, but anything that allows white people to be separate from us, just living near us is a bad thing. Everything about us is something negative. They get more votes by being as racist as they possibly can. And presidents are no different in that regard. So this idea of, again, of Gerald Ford, I wish I'd seen that. I missed that.
Yeah, it was a great, and of course he was in the Republican Party. I misspoke, but yeah, it was a great picture where they and somehow they got it to fit in the statue. Like it looks like he's holding a Confederate flag and wearing a MAGA hat, and then the guy is standing next to him all proud, getting a picture, because he successfully overthrew the state, But anyway, I mean, it was hilarious. The other thing that I thought was that when you were talking about the tapes where Biden is chastising Black journalists and activists, it occurred to me, Black Agenda is to be credited with popularizing or coming up with the Black Miss Leadership class phrase, but I was thinking that it was the Black Miss Journalist class that complained about Black journalists leaking that audio and saying that it shouldn't have been leaked. Like I remember April Ryan was one who was saying, like, how dare these treacherous journalists turn over the tapes? And I'm assuming because they would have been embarrassed at having been treated this way after telling us for several months that we have to support this man because he can be pushed and he's not, Trump. So anyway.
Yeah, I know, but it was so weird to me. Journalists are supposed to want a scoop, right? Aren't they supposed to be happy when something is leaked? I mean, I would think that as a journalist, you would say, oh, thank God, it's like what a great scoop here that we have. But you see where their interests lie. So now their interests lie with Biden. They get position, they get jobs, they get book deals, they get everything by how close they are to him and his administration. So he's not even elected yet, inaugurated yet, and already they're defending them and looking stupid. What kind of journalist doesn't want a scoop like that? I don't know who leaked it, but I thank them. It was it showed us what we already knew, and I hope those people who haven't taken the time to watch it. It's an hour 40 minutes long. The last 40 minutes are when Biden holds court. I wrote about it. I called it Master Biden Speaks. It just seemed like the plantation owner telling the field hands they ought to be grateful. That's how it struck me from the moment I thought. Yeah,
I felt the same way. I would have thought, man, first of all, if I had been in the room, I'd have been thinking, man, how am I going to get this out? I'm about to leak this. Where's Blackie Leaks or whatever we need? I'm about to call somebody. This is going out somewhere. Well, but I really do think it's because they didn't want to be seen as having told us to support this guy, who would then turn around and talk to them like this. I felt that's at least how I interpreted the critique of the leak.
Yes, it was any critique of the leak is just disgraceful. And people, I mean, the good thing about that is people show themselves, and then we know who can be trusted and who cannot. But let's think about Biden. The party coalesced around him and decide. I didn't think he was going to be the nominee. I'm out of the prediction business because I've not gotten these things right the past few years. And they coalesced around him. And they, when Bernie Sanders, he really won Iowa, they rigged that. Then he won Nevada. They're like, oh, then everybody dropped out all of a sudden. They picked Biden. And despite his shortcomings, despite an allegation of a sexual assault, despite the fact that he has, it's clear to me, a cognitive problem. He has had aneurysms, I understand. It's not surprising. Is he 80? He's close to 80. He's never been the smartest person. Excuse me. He was always a mediocrity. So in this moment where they didn't think people were going to see him, he was just his true self. But it was a good reminder. I'm very happy that it came out.
Yeah, I see this comment here that I've seen another view that the leak to assure settlers their interests wouldn't take a backseat to Black people. I think I'm sure that that's partially true. Also, what I'm talking about is the Black journalist response to the leak.
Yeah.
That's what I'm really saying. And their response to the leak is what I think Margaret is correctly saying is very telling. Because as Leah says here, he told him to sit down and shut up.
Take what I give you, which is nothing. Exactly. That's exactly right. It's whoever did, and I have to say, people sometimes overthink, he leaked it himself because he wanted, white people to be happy or something. I guess that's possible. I think
Not
some,
Biden. Maybe
yeah.
his aide or maybe somebody working with him did that. I don't think he didn't come up with that.
No, he didn't. I think sometimes people just miss what's obvious. It's like it's somebody else who didn't like what they saw and quite rightly felt the rest of us needed to see it.
Speaking of what was the phrase you just said that I was going to use? I forgot but speaking of something you just said, it made me think of your point earlier about you quickly mentioned something about the fakeness of AOC. That was something you said something about this moment exposed people. So speaking of people getting sort of exposed, this force the vote moment. Seem to do the same thing. So there's a question that Erica's asking about that we definitely want to have you talk about AFRICOM. So I don't want to forget that. But just real quick, this exposure of AOC and others around the force the vote. Did you see it that way, or is this just another reveal for you about AOC, or how are you reaching this conclusion about her?
About her and all of them. Whatever they wanted when they ran for office. I'm not a mind reader. I don't know what anybody's intentions were, but the system just doesn't give them a voice. Nancy Pelosi, her job is to raise money and smack down progressives, and the two are linked, of course. So no matter how progressive somebody wanted to be when they won their seat, they are not going to be heard. They control these people, and the only way to be effective is to be on the outs with leadership. And that's tough for most people to do. So I am all for these people. They're not our friends. They're not our relatives. They're supposed to represent us. And if they make all these claims to being progressive, we should be able to see something as a result of them being in office. And if we don't get anything, what is the point? There's no point in defending them. There's no point in supporting them. So this force the vote to get a vote on Medicare for all, I am all for it. And it goes back to what I was saying about we have to save ourselves, because they'll always tell you this year isn't the year, next year is the year. Oh no, the midterms are coming up. Oh no, don't talk about this, don't talk about that. Oops, we lost the House. Now we definitely can't think about it. These next 2 years it's going to be, the Democrats are not going to control both houses of Congress for more than 2 years. This is it. And anything we want to see, we should yell and scream and march and demand and primary people and do whatever we have to do to get health care for everyone. So we're in a pandemic. People go broke because they get sick. There was one of the major hospital systems here in New York was still suing people for medical debt a couple days ago. And there was a story in the New York Times, and all of a sudden they stopped. People who haven't paid because they're poor, $1,000, $2,000, garnishing people's wages. That has to stop. And if these progressives can't do that, and I don't care that Biden says he wouldn't sign a Medicare for all bill. Let's see what he would do if the people can be organized. And we have to see these people as adversarial, even the ones who are supposed to be our friends, because the system sucks them in. And they're not our friends. They're supposed to work for us. And they can't do that unless we tell them what we want. So I'm for force the vote. I'm for all.
Yeah, right on. And in fact, that led to another sort of joke, because it came up when I was talking with Aaron earlier too, that for a minute now we've been, I do watch Jimmy Dore's show, and I think it's funny. Yeah. And he does good work. But I've noticed, I said, and I'm not the only one, by the way, but I noticed that the only Black Agenda Report columnist he's had on is Danny. And so we have to start a movement that, bar reps got to be, got to at least include Margaret.
He invited me. I wasn't able to join.
Okay. All right. Well, it still makes a funny joke though, that the only, okay, sure, whether he invited you or not, you still haven't made it there. And I just think it's funny. But you are doing something with. You started a podcast with Danny Haifong, right? Did I see that correctly?
The Left Lens, Black Agenda Reports the Left Lens, and we have YouTube channel, and of course you can see our latest discussions. Last time we actually, it was before the last episode, we had Professor Sharice Burden-Stelly and as our guest. So we're going to have more guests. So we're getting this in gear. So first it was just the two of us. We added a person, so we're going to keep doing.
Oh, there's a third now. Okay.
Yeah, blackagendareport.com. You can see, and also we have the YouTube channel, The Left Lens.
Right on. And that actually leads to another question I did want to ask you about, because it comes up here a lot, and obviously just in activism and organization, the Black community's relationship with others and allies. So whether it's not just Danny, but other non-Black African descended people working with Black Agenda and working with Black organizers, how do you, or maybe not just you, but what is Black Agenda's approach to working with allies, non-Black allies, white allies, et cetera, in this struggle?
Well, first of all, our allies have to really be leftists. I mean, that's what really tells the story. They can't be, kind of sort of liberalish. We are on the left. We are anti-imperialist. I want to talk about foreign policy a little here. Even those Democrats who call themselves progressives, we let them off the hook with foreign policy. So even somebody like Bernie Sanders may have been leftish on domestic policy, but he was a hardcore imperialist on foreign policy. And that is something we do not bend on.
By the way, that's the new TV show coming out, I think, on ABC next fall. They have Blackish, Mixedish, and now Leftish is going to come out starring Bernie Sanders. And no, I'm just playing it. Sorry. I couldn't help when he said Leftish. I was like,
but it could be, but Black Agenda Report. I have learned a lot from Black Agenda Report. Glenn Ford's a phenomenal person with so much knowledge about history, and but you get the real deal in foreign policy by reading Black Agenda Report. Of course, we write about Haiti. We did the best work on Libya of any platform, anybody. We did the best in 2011 when the U.S. and NATO overthrew Gaddafi and destroyed that country and created an ongoing humanitarian crisis. We did the best work on Haiti when the U.S. kidnapped Aristide, which was the last stand, as far as I'm concerned, with the Congressional Black Caucus taking a stand they should have. Maxine Waters and Charlie Rangel and some of these folks really. Charlie Rangel called Colin Powell a liar, as I recall, in so many words. So Black Agenda Report is a great resource. Never believed you. So yeah, you have to, and we have our book reviews. We have Bar Book Forum, and so we have a new cartoonist. I'm blanking on everybody's name now. I'm supposed to be promoting them, but you got to go to Black Agenda Report. Wednesday is Black Agenda Report Day, and it's so funny. Everything that happened before the riot in the Capitol, everybody forgot. So, but don't forget Black Agenda Report.
That's right. Yeah, that's right.
Moments in time where it's, everything is about what happened afterwards. So don't forget blackagendareport.com this week.
Yeah, that's a good point, actually, because I think I even lost it in that too. Yeah. And usually and I'm even helped further by remembering, not only because of the subscription, but also because Wednesday is a payday for me. I get paid on Wednesday. So I'm like, I get my financial paycheck, and I get my intellectual payment.
Okay.
From Black Agenda. Anyway, real quick, because specifically in terms of this foreign policy piece, I want to come back to that question that Erica wanted you to address. You also, Black Agenda does a great job of covering AFRICOM, the Africa Command, which is, even as I've gently reminded, our white left comrades, they don't always talk about that either in their foreign stuff either. Like AFRICOM gets. So could you talk a little bit about AFRICOM and why it's not only is foreign policy important for Black people, but why is this one as an issue particularly important for Black agenda?
Well, the US government, unbeknownst to most people, has divided up the world into these military commands. There's a NORTHCOM and a SOUTHCOM and a CENTCOM and an INDOPACOM. And Bush 43 started the US Africa Command, AFRICOM, at the end of his term in 2008. But it really ramped up with Obama. And essentially, almost every African country, their military is under the control of the US. There are an unknown number of bases and other facilities. Most of this was off the radar until a few years ago when some US soldiers were killed in Niger. But the US is in Niger, in Somalia, in Kenya, in other countries. AFRICOM was the means of, as I said, destroying Libya. The headquarters are in Germany, which is interesting. Nobody would actually take it, even though they were under AFRICOM's sway. Has a good interview this week about the Bar Radio about Cameroon and how AFRICOM has created a humanitarian crisis there. There's no good U.S. intervention any place in the world. There are 800 military bases, various facilities all over the world, and they need to be shut down. So with Black Alliance for Peace, John Mubaraka is one of our editors. I'm a coordinating committee member of Black Alliance for Peace. And obviously, we work together since we have this similar concern. But there's a U.S. A Shutdown Africa campaign, and people, while I'm giving out websites, blackallianceforpeace.com, and people can learn about AFRICOM and how to get involved and how to stay knowledgeable. And that is an effort because the corporate media does such a terrible job by design. And you cannot, it's really terrible unless you know who to follow on social media and which websites to read. You don't know anything about foreign policy. You don't know anything reading the New York Times and Washington Post. And
they didn't even have a fake component of that during the presidential debates last fall. Like they skipped that whole thing. Like they didn't even have a phony attempt to discuss it this time.
They did not. No, they don't. And, whatever. So it's very important that we support any platform which gives us this information that we need so badly. And so we can see already this year, just to talk briefly about the alleged Russian hacking, there's no proof of Russia hacking the Defense Department or whatever agencies they claim. None. There was a hack. There's absolutely no proof. They have no idea who did it. But it's, the same. So that's what I was saying before, the people wringing their hands about democracy and this is so terrible, but they also turn straight towards imperialism and supporting the US in its attacks on other countries. So whatever we say about this attack on the Capitol building, we cannot unite with these neoliberals. We cannot unite with these imperialists, because when it comes down to protecting democracy here or in other countries, it's doubtful whether we can say we really have a democracy here. So we can't unite with those folks.
So I'm just pulling it up here so we can all just quickly review what we all missed since yesterday got taken over. Yeah. Black Agenda has a full set of new content here. Yeah. That we can all get caught up on. Because honestly, I'm glad you made that point, because I'm guilty of that. I completely lost sight of the new edition. It
took all the air out of the room, that's for sure.
Yeah. So this looks great. I can't wait to get into this myself. I've exhausted my list of questions for you for today. I want to make sure that I'm not missing anything that you would want us to cover, at least quickly. And I'm trying to go through the comments to make sure I haven't missed any important questions. There's a vigorous conversation going on, which I appreciate. But
yeah, I would just remind people I loved your book. About I always was doubtful about this whole buying power thing. I never quite believed it. So I personally am grateful to you for breaking this down. So anybody listening who has not bought your book,
and they don't even have to buy it. They can get it for free.
That's right. Yes, the myth and propaganda.
Yeah, that's it. The myth and propaganda of Black buying power. That's good enough. Thank you. That's okay. Perfect.
People should read your book, and please buy my book, Prejudential: Black America and the Presidents. You can get it on Barnes and Noble. You can get it from the publisher, Steerforth Press, steerforth.com. There's an audiobook narrated by yours truly. So I am.
Oh, that's dope. I didn't know about that one.
Yeah.
That's congratulations on that.
That was fun. That was a lot of fun to narrate my own book. But
yeah, well, congratulations. Now we have to make sure. So the next version has to be done by somebody like Kerry Washington or something. We got to get like a super celebrity to do it. No. And by the way, I just was checking here. I was just checking in the link to the YouTube description of this. I put a link to my daughter's interview with Margaret, where you can then link to the book and buy it if you haven't already. So definitely do that. Listen, Margaret, I really appreciate you taking the time. I always love rapping with you. I love your work, and we definitely need Black Agenda Report. So thanks, and keep it up. We appreciate it.
Thank you, and Happy New Year, everybody.
Yeah, likewise. Happy New Year to you too. It's got to get better than 2020. At least you can hope so. At least can't get. Anyway, thanks to Margaret Kimberly, Black Agenda Report. Thanks to everybody for sticking around today. This has been great. We had a lot of good conversations today. A lot of fun. Please like, share, subscribe, become a member of this channel of The Left Lens with Margaret and Danny and Black Agenda Report. All of these sites need the support, need the viewership. And if you put everybody in your rotation, like I have done, in all sincerity, you never need commercial media at all. I literally never deal with commercial media anymore. I just go through the cycle of the people in this media environment that we're able to sort of create anew. And I stay plenty well-informed, in fact, more well-informed and more energized and more inspired to do some radical, revolutionary, militant organizing, which is what we need to do. So anyway, as speaking of militant, radical organizing, like Fred Hampton used to say, to you, we say peace if you're willing to fight for it. So peace, everybody. And we'll catch you next time right here on A Mix What I Like Live. So peace, everybody.
I mix what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like.